Okay, we're live. Hello. This is Jenny Eleonora, and it's actually my first live stream through StreamYard, so I'm super excited about it. And so I am a creativity empowerment coach who helps women to find their creative voices and use them with power. So today I have a guest with me, and that is one of my clients who's Joette. And she's got an amazing story, which you'll get to hear kind of gradually. We're going to go through a little bit of her story, and I'm just so happy you're here, Joette. So I'll ask you some questions in a second, but let me first think for a sec. Is there anything I want to tell people before we launch into your story? Um, I had I have a series of creative play dates. So if you want to get yourself having a little more creativity and a little more play in your life, on Fridays there are creative play dates at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're half an hour long. They're fun. They're exciting, and they give us energy basically for the rest of the weekend and even into the next week. Some people have been reporting back about that. So you can DM me on LinkedIn or Facebook or really anywhere at Grow Your Whole Voice or Jenny Eleonora or Project Eleonora if you want to learn about those creative play dates, or just look around my socials. I'm posting about it here and there. So let's talk to Joette. uh, and I'm going to interview you a little bit to kind of draw out of you what your experience was as one of my clients and one of my earliest clients. So like that's the thing that's exciting me the most today, is that you were one of the first people who I sort of recognized was having not just I was a voice and performance coach then, right? Just mostly, helping with songwriting. So, and things like that. And you were one of the first people that I realized consciously, oh, she's not just having this, like, we're working on this one thing and she's doing it. You're having this total creative transformation. And so that's what eventually led me to do Grow Your Whole Voice. So yeah, what
Oh,
you, yeah, maybe I haven't put it in those terms to you
mhm,
yet,
mhm, mhm.
you're a huge seed in this.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Okay.
what made you decide to work with me at first when we first were meeting?
I had just of late, probably just a couple of years before I met Jenny, I had started to get interested in songwriting, and I had been playing keyboard with friends because I just wanted to know how come people could get together and jam and play piano, and I took lessons as a child, and that was not anything that would have been taught to you. It was just look at the music. And so I really never was a musician. I listened to music, but I wasn't one of those people that sang in front of their mirror, any kind of nothing like that. And if it's anything, I was a writer, but I really had a voice that was quite weak. I did sing in a chorus, kind of it was a select thing. You had to interview, you had to try out for it in junior high. And I didn't think anything about my voice one way or the other was bad or good, or it just joined in. But I really got self-conscious and my voice seemed very, very weak. And I was doing these songs, and then I was presenting them into a songwriting group. And then I was so terrified, and I really, whatever you may think of my song, I certainly didn't help it with my voice. And I was trying to, sing well enough where I could convey my song, but I really was very weak, and I had a really narrow little, I had a, range about 4 keys, and but I didn't want to go necessarily take some kind of fancy course. By some opera teacher or something, and then someone mentioned Jennifer because I wanted something more kind of casual and who could understand what I was trying to do, and which wasn't to be a performer or anything, and then I remembered, and they mentioned Jennifer, and then I remembered when I was a school nurse that you had come to the school in the summer and was doing these music programs with kids, and I could sort of picture you. And then I thought, she would be okay. So it was just a feeling that you were
Your
kind of,
intuition, a
yeah,
gut
yeah,
feeling,
my
you mean?
intuition was, yeah, you were the right kind of person I could connect to. You didn't seem overly formal, and
Mhm.
But really, I just remember we were talking about making some kind of musical instruments about out of a swing that we were going to take down. You guys wanted to use the poles for pipes, something like that. That was the conversation. So as several years later, probably, I looked you up and you said you weren't really doing lessons anymore, like, week to week. Somehow we agreed to kind of a consultation type of thing.
Yep.
And oops, sorry.
That's all right. So yeah, and so then we worked together on some of your songwriting itself, it turned out, right? Like, I was
Yeah,
honored to
I think I
see you.
arrived with a song.
Right. And then also we worked together on you getting your voice out there, singing them in open mics and other kinds of situations, right? And to feel more confident about it. So yeah, um, when while we were working on that, like what did you start to be able to do that you weren't able to do before? Like, or what ways did you feel differently about how you expressed yourself as we worked together?
Pardon me, I'm going to shut this door.
Okay. So so yeah, that's a big thing for me is distractions. I get it.
uh, I think I'm not sure what I was taking in terms of singing because I'd only had a couple listens. I think immediately I felt also a lot of help with my songs, like what you would we kind of had this open dialogue about it. And then mostly I remember you pushing me to do stuff. I was like, what? Or going into a studio and recording one of my songs for I'm like, what? Everything was like, what?
Yeah.
Um, and
I do you mind if I question you a little bit? It felt like pushing to you?
uh, let's say, I don't know, not in a bad way, because you would have never insisted, but it was more like I was of the mind. I had recently retired, and I have this attitude anyway about a lot of things. It's like I just say yes. I just say yes. Okay. But I didn't feel at all secure about it at all,
Mm.
about any of those things. And
Right. Well, you were on, I mean, the whole thing, you were on your growth edge, right? So there were things you wanted to move forward on, so you weren't gonna be able to do any of it without feeling somewhat uncomfortable or without moving, without moving into spaces that were not things you usually did, right? That's
yeah,
what creativity is all about, is doing something new. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to write, and that doesn't. You don't have to present yourself. You just it's on
Right.
paper. You don't have to
Right.
nobody has to look at you. You don't have to open
Well,
your mouth even. So
which
it
leads
was.
us to the next phase,
Mhm.
right? Which leads us to the thing about the next phase, right? So yeah, when we can create just for ourselves, and that's a beautiful thing to do. And when we want to share what we're creating, which is what you came to me for, was really, I want to share these songs with people, right?
Mhm.
They're part of me that I want to share with the world. So yeah, we work to get more confident about doing that. And then you started writing again, right? Or you picked up your book again. And then a couple years later, right? Now we're in the phase we're in now. So what you have this book. I have told people, because you gave me permission to do it, uh, that it's a 40-year project, right? You
Mhm.
book that you've been working on for
Yep.
40
Yep.
years. And to
That,
make a long story short on that one, you're publishing it this year.
yes.
So let's talk about how that came about, right? So this is another thing, right? Like, so that was like the singing and song. I just want to illuminate this for people who are wondering what grow your whole voice is, right? Uh, we have things that we could create just for ourselves, but if we want to share it, we do need to take those steps that are uncomfortable and I guess might feel like pushing, as you're saying. Uh,
Mhm.
Ultimately, I'm hoping people are pushing themselves and not me doing it. um,
Well,
Although I'm hoping I'm inspiring people
yeah, no,
to
no, I
do
I
so.
let myself get, kinda
Yeah,
nudged.
as
Yeah.
we all do. So yeah, like, so you got those songs out there in a way, right? And so the book, right? That wasn't being published. Therefore, as you said, it was all in the realm of, oh, it's just you in your room alone typing, right? Or writing it out or whatever you're doing alone without anybody ever really seeing it. Except you did share it with a few people along the way, namely your nieces and nephews, right? So, and your kids?
Grandchildren. No, I had shared it different. It had even won a couple prizes in an editor interest way in the past when the
You mean
book.
parts of it?
Yeah, no, I went earlier versions of it, and
Oh, earlier versions, but it hadn't really been published per
no,
se
no,
as
no, 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 no. And then I kind of let it go, and I was just very, very busy. And
right.
then, the birth of my grandchild for different reasons had very specific reason. I thought I'd pick it up again, and then by that time it had evolved so much; it was really kind of a big mess. So I had started to pull together what it was, and it was just a giant, raggedy thing I couldn't even get my arms around, and I had to take a couple of years. And I worked with somebody that was, so I said, I need a scary taskmaster. And I had this woman, I would just hand her a couple chapters every week, couple weeks or so, and then we would talk about it. And then I was able to kind of put it into a cohesive sort of, but it was still pretty shaggy in terms of the chapters. And I had started a new voice in first person. It was a first person voice, and before it had been a third person, and now it was a first person, and that's a whole different set of kind of things from a child,
Right.
how you write, not only
Yep.
how they speak, but they are narrating the story. So there's, you got to be really careful with the voice.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I had it like it was pretty 75% there.
Mhm.
And then I just kept on not doing anything with it.
Right. Yeah.
And then at some point I must have mentioned that to you because then you had this.
Yeah, it was a gradual awareness building on my part. At first, you mentioned something like, "Oh, yeah, I have this book I've been writing, and I'm gonna do a retreat to do a little more." And, a year or 2 later, as I found out that it was 40 years that you've been wanting to publish it in a whole form. So,
Actually,
yeah,
probably
you've
not
already
43, but 2 years, yeah.
um, you've already mentioned some of the obstacles that you faced in the earlier phases and stuff, and some of the ones that helped you get to other phases, and some of the supports that helped you get to other phases, like a taskmaster. Sometimes
Mhm.
that's useful at times, right? So yeah, at that moment when I was kind of like, hey, I do this creativity empowerment thing, right? In general, I think I can help you get your book published this year. What was the main obstacle, would you say, at that moment? What had been the main obstacle? Whether it was like a, logistical obstacle or more just an energy obstacle or both.
I'm not sure I identified. I realize that I do better if I just go away. So I get very
Retreat.
distracted by my own life, and I think that, especially with songwriting, spending a lot of time in songwriting is so much more fun, and it's a little short project, a song.
Mhm.
This is some unwieldy thing. You have no idea where you are. It's you're in a morass when you're writing a
Right.
novel. So it was just funner,
Yep.
and it was so social and fun, and um, so yeah, so it's just easy for me not to pick it up and
Right. Right.
just get there and just use there's no involvement of your senses or anything.
You're
It's
right.
very your
Very
eye,
heady.
your brain, and that's about it going.
Your
So
imagination, right.
yeah.
And okay, well, that does give some clues into, though, what about the creative pathways session, which was a version of going away for 4
Mhm,
hours on one day, right? That's what we ended up doing that made it this path towards reaching this creative goal of publishing your book clearer, right?
mhm.
So yeah, we set aside that time. And what do you think, remembering into that session, what do you think was some of the main things that made it then possible to keep moving ahead on that path and
Well,
keep
I would
going?
say, to be honest, part of it is that if I pay money, you know, if I'm like, I take it seriously. Like, oh, I just paid $1,000 to stay at this house. I got to get through, these 20, and I would just like, I was just
Yep,
on it from night to day. Now I'm
yep.
either not, I was,
Accountability to your investment. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So actually, that kind of helped. That
Yep.
and then if you were just coming over as a friend, who knows.
Mhm.
But then, yeah, I think I don't have I don't think I have a big problem with creativity itself or imagination. I think that stuff comes easy. It's more like the end of the execution.
Yeah.
And when it's not about creativity, it's kind of like, you got to just, even with songs, that stuff that just is like practical nuts and bolts. And
Yeah.
so Yeah, that was it, and then Jennifer was well, I actually have 2 other novels sitting around, and Jennifer's like, "You sort of like, you got an issue, you've got issues," you know? You got 2 other ones as well sitting around, um, that were kind of in the stage this one was, except it wasn't 40 years, they were more like 20 years, and then talking about whether there was something really just actually holding me back or holding
Mhm.
the expression of myself into the world again, which I don't feel. Yeah, yeah. Which it was much more critical and critical. It was much more acute when you actually had to stand on stage and sing. That felt much more threatening. But in a
Uh-huh.
way, it's the same thing with
Same
it.
energy, yeah.
Yeah.
There is one moment that I remember. I've got the book here, the little workbook, right? Oh, it's backwards, but anyway, there's one moment during Clarify My Vision that I remember
It's
for
not bad.
you
Yeah.
that you got, like, this really, like, visceral, vibrant, visual and, emotional, picture in your head. Is there any do you remember that one, or do you wanna share
The,
it? Like,
the,
the girl?
yeah, 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 yeah. I think the question had to do with, okay, can you imagine that it's that you've finished it ready for publishing? We can't guarantee about anything about what happens after you pull the book together and you're ready
Right.
to
But
go.
what will it feel like when that has happened? What are you gonna feel like? What is life gonna be like? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got this very strong image of a girl that was probably 7 or 8 years old, and she had this, the classic Japanese bowl haircut, and she was standing wearing some kind of a dress and probably patent leather shoes because but anyway, and looking into the sun and holding this giant book in her arms, and it was done, and she was just so glad and so proud, and that was a really strong image, in fact, which I did really um channel that
Mhm.
every morning, like and it did really help, actually. I really,
Every morning, you mean as you went into the final editing
once I
phase
started
before
doing it, I got, and then it was like she was in my mind when I first saw her. It was just a vision, and then within a few days, it was like the person was inside of me,
yeah,
you know. So it was a kind of an embodiment, and
yeah.
yeah, and you did a lot of. I can't even remember everything you did, but
We were in some space. We were right. That's what we tend to do during a deep session like that, a deep dive, is we go into sort of like other vibrational spaces and
yeah,
sometimes hypnotic, that kind of
yeah,
some kind
yeah.
in our
Which I'm
subconscious.
kind of open to, and I don't know that everybody. It might be different for different people. They might
It
resist
is.
certain things,
Yeah.
and but Jen and I have this kind of we get it, that kind of space,
Mhm,
or I'm comfortable with it.
mhm,
So I think for sure that kind of helped me come to that image.
mhm. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Oh, yay. So, yeah, and it was really beautiful to see you be open to that and to know, like, I felt tingles and all over myself while that was coming to you, because I knew, without a doubt that then you had this connection to this energy of it. And it's so therefore in the alternative timelines and stuff, it was already done and you knew what it was like when it's already done. So, yeah,
yeah,
I love
it was
that.
more like a project I had to get done. I didn't have to think of the story, or
Yeah.
I think I remember one time you asking me something. It's not I think I remember, I do remember. When you think about executing the story, or you think about what do you, and this was before the image, what do you see? And I go, I know, I just see something vague and kind of dusty and gray.
Mhm.
And I couldn't visualize
Yeah.
the stage of, like, you know, um, and I think I've also discovered it's really about kind of performance type things. And you had said, oh, that's probably what kind of, oh, when people are, oh, imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I've never really thought that that would in any way apply to me because I'm pretty confident about doing things like that. But I think it's kind of things like I don't have why are people why am I doing music and and then people were being very positive and I just kind of didn't understand why and it made me actually feel kind of bad and this it was the same thing with actually writing. I just seemed to have like this ability to write a story and then people would make a big fuss and I couldn't understand why it actually made me because I don't have I didn't that wasn't my background and so it made me uncomfortable, really
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
And the fact is that even for those of us who think of ourselves as like super confident people in general, or like, pretty well good with ourselves and knowing ourselves, those creative dreams that are the most close to our core
Mm,
are the most vulnerable. So
mhm,
yeah, in the face of cultural context, in the face of like, the prospect of putting ourselves out there with those very most vulnerable, deepest things about ourselves, putting ourselves out there authentically like that. Yeah, that's bound to trigger all sorts of things, all sorts of nervousness and fear, and anything that we can latch onto, like, I don't have the training, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the talent, that kind of talent. I hate talent. Anyway, it's not a thing. Yeah, those are the things that are going to absolutely happen when we're facing those. And at the same time, it is so possible to have a transformation where we get, as you did with your vision of the girl, that vibrant, colorful girl holding the big book, um, to get such a strong connection with that core passion that
mm,
the vulnerability changes to strength. It's like something we need to put out there because we know it's our biggest power. We learn
mhm,
that when we get connected to it strongly. So I'm so glad that we got to talk about this. Is there
mhm.
anything else you wanted to say today before I launch into my wrap up?
Um, well,
Not
I would
quite.
say, if you're thinking about that more of I mean, I don't know the people that are listening, whether they're actually your clients and they're people that are thinking about maybe joining in with you or just, but I think that if you, if you want, if you would like, if that's something you are thinking about, it's probably worth it to try because if you could be open and kind of connect, I think that Jen has a lot of imagination and a good intuition about what people need. So as like not everybody could have done the session that we had and been comfortable with it. And somebody else would have a different one that I wouldn't have been comfortable. But I think that my sense is that uh, Jenny can intuit really quite well what that person is comfortable and what to lead with, and read the person as to how they're doing. And I think creativity does have a lot to do with what's underneath. It's certainly underneath your cognitive thing, and it certainly has something to do with connecting with universal creativity. So that part of you, if you can open it up and then just let things go, kind of flow, I think that really helps. But you have to kind of trust the process. So I would say trust Jenny.
Yay. Oh, thank you, Joette. Wow, that was a beautiful way to put it all. I've never heard you say it that way, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
And
you're
yeah, I
welcome.
love I that's one of my big, desires and intentions is to be safe for everyone, to be safe for everyone I work with, and to help. Oh yeah, to help people, to help us find that growth edge where we're moving forward with some stretching and potential a little bit of discomfort, but not ever with overwhelm, right? Because the learning stops then anyway. We don't need that. So yeah.
Well, for
Oh,
example, I'm like, no, I don't want to do a podcast. Are you kidding? And I was
uh,
like putting up all my excuses. And she's like
oh, about
gently,
today, about this interview today. Yeah.
yes, gently prodding me. And then I'm like, oh, fine.
Yay, we've moved from me pushing you to me gently prodding you.
And I'm like, well, the normal people would go, sure. Like, what's the big deal? And
Well,
it's
actually, I mean, again, the landscape that I'm in here with creativity empowerment, we're normal people. Like we all have these growth edges, and a lot of people. What did I think it was like Jerry Seinfeld or something like that. It's about public speaking, which this essentially kind of is, right? And more people are afraid of that than death. And so Jerry Seinfeld said something like, "Yeah, more people are afraid of being on the box, like at the podium or whatever, than being in the box,
Yeah,
meaning the
yeah,
coffin.
yeah, yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, you are not alone in being nervous about this. And I am so grateful to you for doing it and for being so present with it. And and just for your whole journey that you've allowed me to witness and invited me in on. And it's been an honor. It is an honor to know you. Thank you so much, Joette. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. I'm sure we have more of the road to take together.
Yes, yes, to be
Wonderful.
continued. I've been using that phrase a lot lately.
Mhm.
So, to be continued with whoever's watching as well. I'm gonna share in the comments of this somewhere or what. I still haven't figured this stuff out, but yeah, like all over the place in my socials, you can find my creative spark meditation. That's a good way to get into things. It's only 8 minutes. It's at resource.growyourwholevoice.com, and you can go ahead and do that meditation. It can help open you up to what your creative dreams are, even if you don't know them yet, and it can help open up your creative channels and get you connected with your creative core. So go ahead and do that, and that will also get you on my email list so you can see what else is going on in my world and the world of my clients like Joette. And
Mhm.
thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And again, thanks, Joette. I am so
Thank you.
honored
Thank
again.
you.
All right. See you all later. See you all next Thursday
Bye.
too. 2 Eastern. Bye.
Bye.